I am super excited. Today, we are really diving into strengthening relationships and understanding kind of behavior uh, and leading with kind of this emotional intelligence. And what we do, especially with a lot of our clients, that, it's not just one deal every 8 to 10 years. It could be 10 deals, 50 deals, 100 deals. I think this is so critical on how you build these relationships. And so emotional intelligence to me isn't just a buzzword. It's really what separates good leaders from great ones. So when we can learn how to build trust, navigate conflict with some confidence, and inspire the people around us, that's where we really start to affect some change in this world, and how you guys will build a better business for yourself as well. So Allison is a leadership coach, a facilitator who helps leaders understand human behavior. She has an impressive background. She was introduced to me by one of my first brokers in the business that was like, Larry, you got to talk to Allison. And so anytime Scott Kibbers comes to me, like he is a great friend and mentor and has taught me so much, I'm like, yes, introduce me. Allison and I hit it off. And Allison, welcome to our Agents Helping Agents Mastermind call. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great. So happy to see everybody.
Absolutely. And so give everybody a little bit of background, right? Like this is not our normal business call, that we're talking about increasing production, but everything that we're going to talk about today will help them with that. But give us a little bit of background on kind of what got you into this arena of helping other leaders in the industry build this emotional intelligence and start affecting others around them.
Well, sure, Larry. First of all, thank you for having me. Second, the way I got into this was about 10 years ago. My dad said to me, I would love for you to give up what you're doing right now and come work with me as a consultant. So prior to that, he had a corporate career with Pepsi. So growing up, um, Coke was a four-letter word in our house. And I could never, even as kids, we couldn't order Coke in a restaurant. We had to order a soda. And if they said they had Coke, we could shake our heads, okay. But um, so he was very invested in the Pepsi culture. But part of what happened with the Pepsi culture is they were a little bit arrogant at the time. They were purchasing up lots of different companies to become part of their brands. And his job as a human resources director was to go out and recruit people who were the best and brightest in the country, who looked fabulous on paper, whether it was the business school they came from, the undergrad degrees, and bring them into Pepsi. And the idea was smart people would just figure it out. Well, unfortunately, what happened was they were put in charge of teams of people. And when they were in charge of teams of people, they failed miserably. And that's because they validated themselves on being individual contributors versus team players, and grew up in a world where everybody, and if you look at our education system, it's really all about us being individual contributors and succeeding on our own, to the point where sometimes we forget that there's all these other people in our lives that have helped us to become what we are and get to where we are. So I began working with him with this knowledge that these types of folks just needed a little bit of training in order to change the way they behaved with others. And so my focus has always been understanding that relationships are the crux of everything that we do, that we have to build and develop them, and it takes time, but that we can do things that instantly destroy those relationships as well. And so having emotional intelligence and understanding how to communicate is truly, well, I guess they are tools that we can utilize and leverage in order to build better relationships, especially in a world that's so digitized right now.
Ah, absolutely. Wonderful. And just so you guys know, Allison, you may have your real
Is
estate
your home
license
still
as
for
well,
sale?
correct?
I do. I do have my real estate license. I've been in the industry
This
for
is
about
Jeff
eight
Russell with
years
eXp
now.
Realty.
I guess
Do you
it's
own the home here on Lincoln?
seven.
Hold on. Let me mute Jeff since he's prospecting here. All right. We should be good now.
Hey, we all appreciate that. So, as a realtor, one of the things that I always think is really important is to get involved in your community, as I'm sure the majority of you are in some capacity. And so we all become leaders. But for me, it was very important because I became part of the real estate community later in life. I wanted to join our local board and women's council and to take advantage of every kind of leadership opportunity that I could so that I would be able to learn the business as quickly as possible and create mentors and develop relationships with people from all over the country. So it's kind of like practicing what you preach.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've been crushing it thus far. And I would definitely say that she is a rising star, and using these tools and resources is going to set things up for you. So you should have screen control. Like, where do you want to start this conversation and education portal for today?
Okay, well, I'm gonna share my screen here so that you can see my presentation, and I'll enlarge it and I'll put it on slideshow. Did everybody see that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, so typically what I do when I work with groups of people is I want to teach them this high performance team model. And the idea is showing behaviors to people on what high performance looks like and what the behaviors behind it look like. So since I gave you a little bit of the genesis of this model, I'll just go into the next slide here, talking about, let's see if this works. Well, it's not letting me, oh, there we go. Talking about relationships. So most of you would probably agree that relationships are our greatest assets. Um, and especially, as I said, in a digitized world where so much of what we do is now controlled by AI and all of this technology that we have at our fingertips, what's really important is to maintain high performing relationships with the people that we work with, the boards that we work on, and most of all our clients. And I know in the real estate industry, we're taught a lot that, oh, you have to give this many touches to people. But in my mind, the relationship is the best place to start and to keep on top of those things, basically, because those are the people that help you build your business. I'm sure everybody's had a relationship or a referral from somebody who just keeps utilizing your services over and over and over again. And that's typically because you've developed the kind of relationship with them that makes them want to come back. Um, but in order to really have high performing relationships with all these different groups and facets that we're involved with, we have to understand and create an awareness around a couple things that are truly important. So, emotional intelligence to me is one of those phrases and buzz phrases right now that we hear a lot, but I'm not sure that everyone necessarily understands what it truly means. So, it really means that we need to be intelligent enough to be able to read people, and read groups. Like, you've heard the expression read the room, and figure out how you have to be morph yourself into becoming the kind of person that the people around you that you're presenting to need. And Larry, you can jump in here anytime. I know you know that, but I'm
Yeah, no, but you're absolutely right. I mean, we are in a relationship business, right? People do business with others that they know, like, and trust. And I think we have all had those clients that, send us, oh, you got to talk to my cousin. You got to talk to this person. Oh, like, an asset manager switches companies and you're their first thought at their new company and stuff like that. So all of this is so relative in everything that we do.
Absolutely. And then it's communicating at a high level with all personalities and individual styles. And let's face it, we're all different. We all have different needs, and we're not always in positions where we recognize that people might have different needs than what ours are. And so one of the key things and tools that I use that we'll get to a little bit further in the presentation is the Myers-Briggs, because to me, it's so important to understand ourselves and how we are perceived, but it's also important to understand how other people perceive us. It's almost like giving us a little bit of feedback about our styles and what occurs when we have communication with others. So I like the Myers-Briggs, and I'll talk about this again, but I like it because it gives you a combination of letters that are the greater scope of personality. And I know in the real estate world, we deal a lot in DISC, and DISC is really just a spin-off, and it's of the Myers-Briggs, and it's for the purposes of identifying specific behaviors and clients for sales very quickly so that you can meet people where they are. And so communicating at the highest level possible is one of the greatest tools that we can utilize. And I think one of even the bigger thing is recognizing what people need from us so that we can all modify our behavior a little bit to get to where we need to be in order to serve people better. Uh,
Beautiful.
and then finally is understanding the complexities of human behavior. So if there are 16 different types of personalities, people fall all over. There's a graph that shows you um, how strong you are or clear on that dichotomy. And then so everybody falls all over the graph. So you're dealing with people who, human behavior is pretty complex. We all come to work with a ton of baggage. And so for me, I typically try to ask people to limit that baggage pretty much to a carry-on. Um, so one of the things that I really have found in my life, and I'm sure you all have experiences, is that this Maya Angelou quote is so poignant. And then she said, I've learned that people will forget what you said and people will forget what you did, but people will never forget the way you made them feel. And something that I always notice is if I hear a song, like an 80s song come up, I'm probably dating my or aging myself here, but if I hear a song, sometimes it'll take me back to like high school, standing in the hallway at my locker. And I feel like that's what happens with us in the way we make people feel is, we are triggered by people sometimes who have hurt us, but we're also triggered by people who have done tremendous things for us. And to create this awareness that we have the capability to really cause people to feel something, um, physiological when they see us or talk to us or learn from us is a huge thing. So I always like to have people think about this in the back of their minds.
And guys, if you guys have any questions or comments or anything, feel free to put a note in the chat or unmute yourself and jump in and stuff as well, so we can get as much out of Allison as possible while we have her here.
Yeah, absolutely. This is much more fun for me when it becomes a discussion versus a monologue. So I appreciate that, Larry. Um, so this is a rhetorical slide that I put in here, but do you view yourself as this individual contributor who does everything on their own? Or do you view yourself as a team player? And there's only one right answer here, so I hope that everyone got that one right, and that's that we all are team players. So we're all leaders in our homes, in our families, in our communities, in our businesses, and like on the boards and the volunteerism, whether it's whether you're coaching your kid's soccer team or sitting on the board of your local association, whatever it is, when you're contributing, you're part of the greater scheme. And I think a lot of people forget that because we all have these personal agendas that we arrive with when we show up.
Yeah, it's hard, right? Because you do have this sense that you want to accomplish the most for yourself, right? And that's kind of the goals and stuff that you're set out for. But at the same time, you got to realize that there's this whole network, and the more that you help other people grow, the more that you grow yourself. And sometimes it's hard to see through the forest when you're in it and you're just kind of surrounded by everything there. But that's a really good point.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I show you this picture of the Navy SEALs because to me they are a high performing team. And like I said, I look at everything as a team. And so their concept is no one can high perform alone. And they take people who have never met one another and they bring them to training. And all of a sudden, within 13 weeks of training, these folks are so aligned and so invested in one another that they would lay down their lives for each other. And that comes through a series of trainings and tasks that they are required to do while they are learning how to become Navy SEALs. And so I had a friend years and years ago who was a highly decorated Navy SEAL. And I think that means that he probably went on a lot of missions and, maybe even had a lot of kills, I guess. But one of the things I asked him about was the fact that, like, how do you go from just being this individual who shows up to training to all of a sudden being completely aligned and wanting to lay down your life for your fellow man? And he said, well, one of my favorite metaphors for what we would do is they would take us in these Zodiac boats. And it wasn't like on the 4th of July in nice warm weather down in San Diego. It was, November up in off the coast of Seattle, where they would take us and they put us in this tumultuous water. And what they would do is they'd basically say, okay, you have to run this mission. You have to get from point A to point B. And he said, so you could imagine with the waters being high and the waves coming over us, that it would be easy for somebody to fall out. But we were all part of that team and we had to get from one point to the next point. And because of that, he said, what do you think you would do if somebody fell out of that boat? And obviously, my first inclination, I think most human nature is that wouldn't you turn the boat around and go get them? And he said, no. What Navy SEALs teach us to do is that we all have to have the same experience. We have to jump in the water after that person. And thus, if you don't want to go in that icy cold water and jump in out of after somebody, what you want to do is make sure that nobody falls out of the boat to begin with. And I thought this was such a great thing, especially to teach to teams, right? It's not a life or death situation for us. However, when you think about it in terms of we all are vulnerable at some time, and do we want to be on a group or with a group of people on a team who would easily dismiss us and kick us out of the boat? Or do we want to be part of a team where someone comes to us and says, what is it that I can do to help you? And it's not because they don't think that we're capable, it's strictly because they see a need and they come to fulfill it. But unfortunately, I think in the real world, we have these things called manners. And we think that if we go and we ask somebody how we can help them, that they perceive it as we think that they're not capable. And that's the last thing on earth. So if you have the bandwidth to be able to help somebody, always come at it with the point is, I'm doing it with the intent of helping or making you better.
Man, that's huge. And a lot of folks on this call specifically are building like real estate teams, real estate groups, right? They're inspiring others. And who do you want on your boat with you guys? Right? Like this is an important aspect, right? Like do you want somebody that's going to jump in or, turn the boat around because that's a little bit more convenient and they don't want to get wet? And that's a different shift in culture, right? Like that's a different shift in building the environment. And how do you align with those other A type players that want to go where you want to go at the end of the day? So just something I want you guys to think about there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really is. Who do you want in the boat with you, and who do you know that would jump in the water with you? And it's usually
Hey,
people that
this is Karen. I have got a question to that point that you just made. How do you go about choosing those people who would have that instinct and understanding to jump in the water?
Well, it's a really good question. And Karen, I would say that, we typically align with people who share similar values to us and we find commonality in that. So it's not like we have to surround ourselves with people who are the same. But what we have to do is we have to create values that everybody say, yeah, I align with that. I want to be a team player, because there's plenty of organizations where people can go and they don't have to necessarily be loyal to you, but you want to find those people who have similar values to you, who treat people kindly, and who you feel like you have strong enough relationships with to want to go through the hard stuff. Because life's easy when things are going really well, right? It's when we get down into it and we haven't had sales for a couple months and people start jumping ship. I mean, literally, right? A lot of people will switch brokerages just because they think that they're going to be offered something that they're not getting when really it has a lot to do with who they've surrounded themselves with. Does that make sense?
And
Did that answer the question?
well, and the other point that I would say on that, Karen, was the fact that they didn't start that way, right? Like when they entered Buds, right, which is their camp that they go to, they
Right.
didn't start that way. It
Mhm.
was a process of spending time together, building rapport, doing exercises, etc. And
Mhm.
so not everybody makes it, right? Like everybody that goes there with that intention to be a Navy SEAL is not everybody that finishes.
Right.
And so there's a weeding out process to where, you know, I find this a lot where agents come to me and they're like, oh, Larry, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And then they join us, right? And they don't show up for onboarding call, right? They never build their CRM out. They don't take advantage of our funnel pilot or even register for some of our clients so that we can't even do what we set out to do because they didn't do their part. So that's, I think that's an important aspect as well, as not everybody will make it, but this
Mhm.
is where we constantly have to be looking for
Mhm.
who is that next best team member. There is always room for talent on your team. And
Right.
that's where every networking event, every showing, every agent relationship, like
Mhm.
this is where I would be thinking like, oh man, Karen crushed it on that transaction. Like I would love, you know, to do more business and stuff with her and then figuring out those. But it's kind of a dating process. And in my eyes, Allison, what do you say to that?
No, I totally think it is. Sometimes we have to try people on for size, just like you all have probably, I mean, not instantly joined EXP. You might have been somewhere else and had different experiences, and you got to dip your toes in the water until you find what feels right for you.
Okay.
Okay, so this next concept, emotional intelligence, I'm a huge fan. There's this book called Emotional Intelligence 2.0. It is a fella named Travis Bradberry. And here's why I like the book. I like it because it gives you a login code to basically be able to take the emotional intelligence assessment. And then, so you take it to start, then you read the book and you start practicing things. And then over time, you can see if you've developed better emotional intelligence by logging back in and seeing how your scores changed. And obviously, this is something that you determine, right? You answer the questions, but if you really want to be an emotionally intelligent person, then that's going to be one of those things where you're truthful with yourself. And it's great because it gives you tips on where you can develop these ideas on how to become more emotionally intelligent. So all it is really our ability to make healthy choices based on understanding our own feelings and emotions, things that trigger us, things that bother us. I usually use the analogy of road rage. I live in a snowbird town, and a lot of times around this type of time of year, we have a one-lane highway that gets us from, or a two-lane highway that gets us to most places in my little city here. And a lot of times you'll see these people and they're riding 35 miles an hour in a 45, and I'm in a hurry, but they're not because they're here on vacation, right? And I see a lot of people swerving in and out of traffic, trying to teach these folks a lesson, and then they end up stopping at the same stoplight. Meanwhile, they've, swerved in and out. Everybody's kind of cussed them out in their head or in their car, right? But by the time they get to the traffic light, now they're looking over and they're saying, oh crap, now I have to look at this person, right? If I do something like that, I want to stay a little bit behind so I don't have to look them in the face. But the thing is that we react emotionally to almost every single situation that we have. But then by the time we get to that red light or the stop sign or whatever it is, all of a sudden our angst and our anxiety has come to the part of our brain where it's rational. And we say, did we really have to do that? And so road rage is a very, vague kind of thing, but I'm sure you all have triggers on things that just drive you nuts. about what other people do or things that they say or how they behave. And this is to create an awareness that you don't have to respond right away. What I always tell people is that your IQ is the thing that's going to get you hired, but your EQ determines whether you get promoted. So when I talked about those Pepsi folks, it was their IQ and their resumes it's what truly got them hired to begin with, because it all looked so good. But then it was these behaviors that were so poor and that people didn't want to work with them. And so they were let go immediately. And those are the things that we can actually do and develop over time as we can increase our emotional intelligence. So what's the difference between IQ and EQ? I get this a lot. So your IQ is determined when you're fairly young and it's given to you in a test that's typically timed. And you're looking at patterns and shapes and all these different things. And that's basically measuring the rate at which you can learn. And over time, we can learn, we can read a bazillion books, we can go to amazing conferences and trainings and all that kind of stuff. And we learn over time, but our ability to learn doesn't increase. But with emotional intelligence or EQ, what we actually can do is raise our level of these things that I would call soft skills. And the things that really help in managing these relationships, especially the ones, I mean, I don't know about you, but had some clients and I've got some clients that are pretty difficult. I would love to hear about, some of you who might have had an experience with somebody rather recently and said, gosh, what can I do to make this better? I want this thing closed.
Anybody have an example that they're willing to share there? I think that we've all had some of those clients, and we've talked about those on this call. Like, who has an example that they want to share with Allison?
Well, I have something, and I don't know if it's exactly what you're talking about, but I have a client that I've had for several years, and on this last transaction that we're conducting, it's been really messy and very complicated. I'm dealing with a brand new agent who doesn't know REO, so that led into some of the frustration. But how do I approach the asset manager, because I feel like she's very frustrated? So how do I approach the asset manager and assure her that I recognize that fact and will do better?
Well, I think it's a great question. And a lot of people have questions similar to this. I think what you really need to do is just say, hey, I recognize that this is a newer agent here. And here's the thing is we all want the same result. And so I think we need to take a step back and be really respectful with one another, recognizing the fact that this is a newer person. How can I ensure that I am more helpful so that we bring this transaction across the line? Right? But that's not our natural way of necessarily thinking of things right off the bat. So it's kind of taking that in and recognizing that, yep, she's frustrated too, but here's what I also have on the other side of this. I mean, we were all new agents at one time. And we were also, I was always grateful when somebody called me out and said, or, especially if they did it in a respectful manner. So this is how you're going to want to approach this and go about this. It just makes it so much easier, right? Than to create this butting of heads with somebody else. And before you know it, you've got this bad relationship and everybody's fighting when you're all working towards the same thing. It just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Thank you. That was exactly.
Because in that same situation, Debbie, I think it's really easy for everybody to blame it on this new agent. All right, like, well, like this is a new agent. Well, this is that, right? It's really easy to take that blame off of us, right? Versus kind of going this route that Allison is talking about. I think this is the bigger side of it, and the one that's going to get the better results and stuff as well. And I don't even think that you have to take on the responsibility for the issue, right? But figure out the solution for the issue, I think, is absolutely key.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
Well, and that's what there should never be any problems that there really are not solutions to. Otherwise, there's technically not a problem. And I read that in the 1 Minute Manager years and years ago, and I thought that's kind of a strange thing to say. And now I recognize it is that I think we as realtors, and the longer we are in the industry, we've seen a lot more things, right? And I would say there is a way to get around almost everything or work through almost everything. But it's recognizing that not everybody's thinking the way that you are. And so how can we wrap our arms around them and say, we need to get there together, kind of like the boat and the Navy SEALs, even when they're not people who work with us directly. So I just wanted to take a couple of seconds to share with you how this works in the brain is that we literally experienced 400 to 500 emotions every day. And we don't recognize them because they don't elevate our physiology, meaning they might not make us laugh or make us cry or make us sweat or get our heart racing, right? But when we have elevated emotions, then we have to manage those and think about those in a more critical way. So these emotions are hitting us in the nape of our neck, right at our spinal cord, and then they're traveling through the limbic system. And if you look at this slide where it says limbic system, that's where we have this thing called the amygdala. So this is a little brain biology for you. That is our fear center, and that is our fight or flight reactor. So before, and you could see where the rational part of our brain comes in, but before we even get to rational, our brain is already trying to protect us. And so when something happens to us, and let's say we're not just happy, we're elated, right? So we might have a big smile on our face, our heart is racing, we're just super excited, right? That's all happening as a response. But if we have something really bad happen to us, say, you were really counting on a commission and all of a sudden you found out that the buyer is going to cancel on you and you don't have anything else in your pipeline. Well, that's going to cause this other immediate reaction to you and you're going to feel it, right? So that's the time when we usually react and we don't do it in a good, positive way. We sometimes, it'll make us cry, right? It'll make us pissed. We might go kick something. But then when we regroup and it hits our rational brain, that's when we say, okay, what do I need to do next? How do I reframe this? How do I get it right back on the market as quickly as possible? And oh, by the way, could I call the other agent and see if there's anything we could do to keep this together before I overreact or call that person names or whatever it is, because our instinct is to react because it's about our brains keeping us safe. Make sense? Well, I hate to say this, but I like to call it out, but you're replaceable. And we know in the real estate industry, people, you sold a house to so-and-so and now you see it's on the market again. I'm like, what happened? I thought we had this great relationship. Well, maybe it's the fact that you didn't keep in touch. Maybe it's the fact that they didn't feel like they got the services that they wanted, or maybe they just didn't like you. Maybe they didn't even remember your name. And that happens all the time, right? But here's what's not replaceable, and that's who you become for the people around you. And so that's why this is so critical, because the quality of your life is not only about all these things that you do, and we validate ourselves on how much money we make, the cars we drive, the house we live in, the accomplishments of our friends and family and children and all those types of things, but it's really about who you can become for the people around you. And so if you're about having these high performing relationships, and I know that every time I change environments, I'm going into something that's completely different than what I just came from, right? So, I have to think about who I need to be for each of the people that I'm working with. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
We've all heard the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And I would ask you to take it even further and move into the platinum rule. And that's treat others as they want to be treated. So you know what that requires? That requires a lot of communication, because people don't walk around with name badges saying who they are, what their personality type is, and what they need in their environment in order to be successful with you, right? We have to pick up on those things. And so there are these tools that we can utilize along the way. And then it just becomes a superpower after a while, because it becomes innate in who you are. So I don't know about you, but I think my kids were born with these. I think they came out of the womb with these, because they can work these things better than most people I know. And the problem is that we all have them, and we've got access to all of this information right at our fingertips. Like these little geniuses live in everybody's pocket. So we can use it for good and avoid relationships and send a lot of emails. Well, you know what emails do? They give us a lot of opportunity for miscommunication. You know what? The crux of what I do, helping people and coaching them, is fixing the miscommunication. So what I try to do is get ahead of that and say, here are some things that you can utilize and think about prior to making the mistakes that you make. And then of course we all know that texting can be, it could be deadly for us, especially in our relationships, because we might be operating in our world, because that's what we are, without putting on more of a peripheral vision lens, where we might write something really quickly, but we don't really necessarily know how somebody else is going to take it. And so the thing is when you're communicating, especially if you're in a position where you're feeling like it's getting tense and, we're headed towards those rough waters, maybe it is to pick up this little genius and have the conversation, because that way people can understand your tone, where you're coming from, and say, I think we're trying to say the same thing here, but we're missing it. I told you that I teach this Myers-Briggs, and the reason that I do this is because it is another tool in my arsenal so that I could pick up on what people need from me extremely quickly. And the more I have found, like, people learn a lot about themselves, but I'm not doing it so they can identify the things in themselves. Obviously, they need to recognize when they do something that is not optimal for the relationship or for the communication. But really, I want to teach this so that you can pick up on cues that other people are giving us, because they're always telling us who they are. And we just need to be able to recognize it when they're telling us. So I'll give you an example, and maybe Larry, you want to pipe in on this one as well. But you might have somebody in your office who says, I only want to see this kind of house. It's just going to be between these two houses. And you show them the houses, they pick one, you send them the contract, and 2 seconds later, they've signed it. They haven't looked at anything, right? I mean, those are the best clients ever. They're the easy.
Yeah.
But then we have the other ones who are like, I want to see 10 homes today and 10 homes tomorrow, and then we're going to go home, we're going to make a decision, and oh, by the way, I need to review the contract, and I'm going to take all day to review it, right? So they're telling us what they need from us. So I know that the second one's going to need a lot more specificity from me in this transaction than the other person. Now, the other person, who is my favorite, I got to also make sure that just because they signed everything, they're obviously not understanding. I mean, what our contracts now, our offers are probably, by the time we send all the disclosures and everything, and we're talking about 65 pages, and they just sent it back to us. So we know they didn't read it. So now we know that we have to explain every part of the way. But as long as you recognize what, you're picking up what they're putting down, then you can meet them exactly where they are, and they tend to like you better for it. So like I said, I use this tool. You can use a lot of the other ones. It gives us the greatest scope of personality. It puts a lot of our innate behaviors. And when I say innate, the things that we do habitually. So for instance, if I said to put your pen in your hand and write your name, you'd put your pen in the hand that you typically use and write your name, and you wouldn't have to think about it. But then if I said, put the pen in your other hand now and write with that. Well, you can do both. But the thing is that one was easy and you didn't have to think about it. And that's how we communicate. The other part of this is that now I put the pen in the other hand and I was able to do it, but I had to think about it a little bit more. It was sloppy. I had to turn my page. It wasn't comfortable. It doesn't look like it normally does. But the point is that we all have the ability to modify our approach and our communication with other folks. So I'm sure you've heard the term paradigm shift, and I love this because I'm a huge Stephen Covey follower. He was a psychologist, probably most noted for his work in the 50s and 60s. But basically what that is it's a belief change that occurs with more information. And one of the stories that I took from one of his books was he talks about going on a train, and it's him going on the train. He's dressed up in New York City. He's on the subway. He's dressed up for church. He's sitting there reading his newspaper. And then at the next stop, a gentleman with 3 small boys comes on the train, and he goes and sits in the corner. Well, all of a sudden, the boys start to misbehave, and they're running up and down the car. They're kicking each other. They're fighting with one another. And at one point, one of the boys goes over and knocks the paper out of the guy's hand. And the guy's making an assessment like this. Okay, I'm looking over at this father and he's not doing anything. So he's starting to believe that this guy is a really bad father. Well, it comes to find out that once the paper is knocked out of his hand, he goes over and he addresses the father and says, "Sir, your kids have been obnoxious and disturbing everybody on the train since you got on. You know, what kind of father allows this kind of behavior?" And he says, "I'm sorry, sir, we just came from Sloan Kettering. And if you know Sloan Kettering, it's a cancer center in New York City. And the boys just lost their mother this morning. I lost my wife, and I was just thinking about and consumed by everything that I have to do." So, with one extra piece of information, he automatically goes from this is a bad father to this is a grieving husband and a guy who's just can't catch a break right now, right? And so instead of looking at him as this bad person, he then starts to modify his behavior and says, "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. I know at our next stop, there's a diner. I would love to get off the train. Maybe I can get breakfast for your boys while you're making the phone calls that you need." You got to remember this was back in the, 50s and 60s. This wasn't when we had our little genius in the pocket, in the palm of our hands. So the reason I bring paradigm shift up is because sometimes we think that people are behaving in a way with us and it's about us, or they're trying to do it just to agitate us or irritate us. And what we typically find out is that it had nothing to do with us, right? But if we ask them the why questions and we go to really try to understand the behavior and what's going on, we tend to be able to tolerate behavior that we couldn't previously tolerate because now we know that there's something underlying. And that's what's so great about personality profiles, because people who don't get along for years sometimes just think that it was because they were just trying to piss each other off, and just to find out that they just communicate in 2 very different ways. So this is sort of the elephant in the room, but I think it has to be addressed. And the thing is that I have never met a person who has the kind of self-esteem that they deserve. And that's typically because we deal with this fear and insecurity. And we know what our pitfalls are, where we come up short, where our warts are and our bruises and all that kind of stuff. And that lives in our heads. But anytime we go out into the world and we have an experience that lends any sort of credibility to that, we start to create these fears, and they manifest themselves in our heads to be way bigger. And so this guy's running away from the saber-toothed tiger that his brain is trying to protect him from primitively. But the common fears that I see among people, and I'm going to start to speed up here so I can get to everything, are not being enough, throwing out a great idea, what you thought was a great idea, and somebody like flat out rejecting it in front of other people. And that doesn't feel good, right? What are the chances of somebody doing that again? And then being perceived as less capable. And that's sometimes when you ask if you can help somebody, they say they are looking at that as, obviously you don't think I can do it. That's not it at all. So you got to come at this from a different approach, and then not fitting in or feeling excluded, like I just don't fit in with this group of people, not being valued. And of course, everybody fears failure, but we all know that we fail every single day in a multiple level of ways, but they're just small failures. And hopefully when we're doing it, we fail forward instead of falling on our butts. And so I call it the elephant because we have this fear and insecurity on one side, but we have to be able, as leaders and confidants and people in the relationship, to have confidence and capability on the other side of this. And so you ever notice, and it's football season right now, and I'm a big college football fan, but you're watching your team and you're down by several points, and you can see the student section gets super quiet and whatever, but then all of a sudden somebody kicks the field goal and it's really far and the energy rises back up, right? We're still in this game. Well, that's the thing, is when you do these tiny things and show that you're capable, the confidence in everybody goes up. So we're never worried about what people are truly fearful and insecure about, because we all have them. What we want to do is raise each other up and create confidence and capability, because that's what is another thing that draws people and attracts them to us. We all have had this best boss. Maybe it's Larry. I'm sure it probably is, but the best boss and leader, the kind of characteristics that they had. And it usually, we did a study with 300 executives on this, but these were the things, and I'm not going to read them to you, but these were the things that they said were most important. But I think number 2 is one of the things that we gloss over every time is, there's that whole expression, nobody cares what you know until they know that you care. I mean, I'm talking about grown men who say, I need to know people care about me when I come into the office each day. I need to know that what I value and what I bring to the table is being acknowledged, because, that's good for our self-esteem. And people will go anywhere and do anything to be with a kind of leader or boss who gives them what they need. So this is just kind of a leadership slide that I added in. There's the Navy SEALs going over the waves, but the reason that people choose to have any kind of relationship with us, whether it's leadership or they're our clients or they're board members or whatever, is because they believe that there's something in it for them to do so. It's all predicated on that belief. So, I've looked at it. It's like that in religion. It's like that in politics. It's like that in the music, the kind of videos or movies that we watch, right? We get something from that relationship. And so in the back of your head, you always have to ask, in this particular room with these particular people, what is it that they need from me? Because they will follow me into the fire when I give that to them, because they have confidence in me. And so what I did is I broke professional relationships down into 3 different categories. So we have one side, we have a loyalist, and that person is the person who shows up every day, helping you, wanting you to succeed, is that person who says, what can I do for you? And they are there with open arms to receive you, to give you the kind of feedback you need, because we all need feedback. It's couched a lot of times as constructive criticism. I don't look at it as constructive criticism. I look at it as, you're going to give me something that I cannot change unless I know what it is. So if I know that I'm doing this and it's bothering you or pissing you off, let me know, give me that feedback, because now I can change it. Now, if I choose not to change it, then it's also a choice I've made not to succeed with you. So you can see how that goes. But I would say the majority of the people that we meet in the course of our lives are these benign saboteurs. And I call them benign because benign actually means good. Like if you have a skin spot, you want it to be benign because it's a good one versus, a malignant one. But these are the people who are indifferent to you and your success. They don't care. And typically it's not because they don't like you. It is simply because you have not invested the time and effort into the relationship that lets them know how much you care. And so what I try to tell people is to look at everybody as being in this indifferent, ambivalent category, and then trying to figure out how you can move them from that ambivalence over to, I want to be your loyalist because I like myself better. I like when you're here in the office, you mentor me, you make me feel good about myself, and you give me the feedback I need versus what I want to hear. And then finally, these malicious saboteurs, these are people who just don't belong in our lives. These are people that would actually expend energy trying to help you or watch you fail, and they don't have a place in any organization. And this is the last slide. And so, we talked about the boats. And so to kind of bring this all together is, you want to put people on the boat. And Karen, you asked the question, you want the right people on the boat, and you want to invest in them and their relationships, because what you're doing along the way is you're creating a group of loyalists, and loyalists don't let you fail. And that kind of sums it up, Larry.
I love it. And I think it's so needed in today's day and age, and with everything that we're building over here within this group and stuff as well. And again, we have a lot of those Navy SEALs on this team, right? That, I mean, just like Greg was saying, right? Like, oh, I reach out to Latanya, I reach out to this person, it saved me so much time. Like, those are the people that we want to surround ourselves with, the others that are really pouring into the community. And sometimes we'll have to get through some people, right? There's going to be a lot of people that say they want to be that person, but they don't want to do the work, right? They don't want to work on themselves. They don't want to take on the extra. They don't want to do this. They don't want to do that. So this is where it's really important to continue surrounding yourself with people that add value to you, that you add value to them as well. Guys, while we have Allison on, questions, comments, concerns on your side of things, questions on how you can implement this into your team, or issues that have came up as you're trying to grow a team.
Wow, I must have explained everything perfectly and everybody's just good. No, just kidding.
This is Karen again. I think one of the things we have to learn to do is, when we're talking to people, is to listen to the things that they're not really saying.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's on the phone, or if you on Zoom and in person, I think we also have to look at the language of everything, the body and the communication language. I think those might be some of the biggest clues that we often miss.
Yeah, I think that's totally right. And that's the thing is about having emotional intelligence. You've got those nonverbal cues. For instance, if somebody is backing away from you and you're having a conversation, they're clearly trying to tell you that they got to get off to the next appointment. And for some reason, I'm talking to people that just keep going, right? Like, I'm showing you exactly what I need you to do, and that's to stop talking.
Thank you for contribution and stuff today there, Karen.
I'm learning because I like to give people the benefit of the doubt when I first meet them. And I think sometimes I'm going to need to learn how to let go early and to hang on to some people a little bit more. So I'm learning bit by bit.
Yeah, and I think that we're all constantly learning that same lesson, actually, right? Like, because even with Allison, or some of the things that I've been through, like, you still learn new lessons every single day, right? Like, you come against bigger adversaries, or people that hide it better or worse, or something like this. And so it's in my eyes, it's a constant growth cycle where we're constantly adding on more tools and skills and just becoming better and better ourselves every single day.
Yeah, and the cool thing about understanding behavior too, everyone, is that behavior is predictable. And so the more you can predict it, the more you can be 2 steps ahead. And that's where your most emotional intelligence really steps in, because now you're anticipating, this is what I'm going to say, this is what they're going to say back to me, and I'm 4 steps ahead. That way, when you're in the middle of something, you don't have to say, oh, I wish I would have said that, or I shouldn't have said that, because you've already thought about it, because you know what the behavior is going to be.
Very true. Anybody else have anything for Allison today?
Yeah, thank you, Allison. I just wanted to mention I was exposed in new home sales, personality selling. Charles Clark had a book, Bulls, Owls, Lions, and Tigers, where I learned a lot about how to identify the personality type of the prospects that were coming in by the car they drove, vanity plates, and different things that allowed you to identify on how they wanted to be treated in the transaction. So this ties into some degree with the emotional intelligence, but I just wanted to mention that.
And
Knowing
you could
how
use
to
a number.
identify.
Yeah, Marva, you could use a number of these tools. So whatever, makes the most sense to you. Like I said, I use the Myers-Briggs because to me, it gives the greatest scope of human behavior. But if there's a tool that works for you that helps you identify those things quickly, then you're 3 steps ahead of what any other agent would do, because they're not thinking about it and you are.
Yeah, it's very important that you said how people want to be treated. That platinum rule
Yeah.
is so important.
Yeah. Did we lose Larry?
Nope. I'm here.
Oh, there
My
you are.
service was no, I'm here. It probably just shifted over to Marvin and stuff there. I appreciate that, Marvin, because you have a ton of experience with everything that you've been through with new home sales, team leader training and everything else. Like it's a important set of tools that you have for sure. Anybody else have anything? Well, Allison, I am so grateful that we were able to connect and have you on. Thank you so much. If people want to stay connected, follow your journey, right? Like get back in touch with you, how do they do that?
You can find me on Facebook or Instagram. And Instagram is probably the easiest. It's at AllisonPaoliRealtor.com. Or not .com, you know what I mean, dash realtor. I'm so used to the .com. Or you can find me on Facebook too, and it's Allison Meagher, Meagher, Paoli.
Beautiful, guys. Well, make sure that you're connected and stuff there.
Can
She's
she
doing
put
some
that
great
in,
things.
Notes?
Sure.
Larry?
Yeah, she'll put that in there. And again, make sure that you're connected and stuff with her. And she has a really interesting journey. We were talking as you guys were in the waiting room, you know, that it's conference season. And a lot of us were all going to be at 5-star this week, you know, and then we have REOX, and then we have this, and then we have that. Right. And she's no different on the conference circuit and stuff right now. And so she has a fun journey and stuff like that. And if you guys can ever add value to each other, like please make sure that you guys stay connected and figure out how to do more with her, because this is a unique skill set that will help with your sales, with building your team, with attraction in every other aspect. I mean, being a father, a mother, a husband, a significant other. It helps with all of those things. You can start to identify these patterns and you know, effectively manage situations like that. All right, guys.
All
Well,
right.
I appreciate you guys to death. Thank you so much for signing on. Allison, again, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate you guys. And if you guys need anything from me, call, text, or email me. And I look forward to talking to you guys soon. Have a great week, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.